Erika, so good to see you.
It's
And
nice to see you as well.
so thought we'd just record a little bit of a video to capture some of our shared learning over time. So you and I have known each
Yeah.
other for quite a long time now. We've been on our own parallel journeys into self-management and teal and what I call leading together.
hmm
And so maybe just start, you can just talk through a little bit about what your journey has been, where you've been and where you are at now.
Yeah, sure. I would say that officially my relationship with Teal and leading together began at the moment. And they're an innovation firm in Toronto, and we are. Uh, it was always an organization that was trying to do things differently, even before we discovered what leading together might look like. We were already starting to buck the idea that things had to be hierarchical, that things had to be the way other organizations do them just because. So I think that was sort of the nascent stages of me getting involved, was just being in an environment where we were already searching for what might we do differently, how might we do something differently, and what proof do we have that it might work. But if I actually go back further, when I was still a semi professional singer, I was working in an ensemble that was an unconducted chamber choir. So if you imagine a chamber choir usually has a conductor at the front, and the conductor's job is much like a CEO to make all the major artistic and logistical decisions. They wave the wand and you follow the wand and you do your job with a certain degree of creativity and expertise, but you follow the leader. And being an unconducted chamber choir, we had to figure out ways to share leadership, and we sort of did it in a way that was uncomfortable at first because we tried to just collaborate all over the place.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it ended up being more like, the loudest voice wins, or the person who tends to take leadership, and it just got really uncomfortable. And then essentially what we did after that, when we discovered the tension, was we organized ourselves in such a way that each person or each song was given a a leader or someone who owned it. So think of yourself like the product owner of that song. And we would collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. But if it reached a point where a decision had to be made, this soft or loud, grow or decline, this pronunciation or that pronunciation, the owner would decide and no one would question it. And I remember getting to teal and getting to um, holacracy, and sort of looking at different ways of doing that. I remembered this whole experience and I was like, this is familiar to me. This experience of saying, oh, Brent's got the baton here. He's the one who's going to lead us on this. He is making the decision. And we gave him that authority. And now I just have to do it. We can argue. Like I can say, but Bach never would have intended this to happen. And you can say back, but I, feel this way and these are my reasons and it's my song. And I'd be like, okay, you've heard me, and we move on. And it was when we finally got to holacracy and owning roles and owning your own leadership within an organization, it just harkened me back to that moment. And I thought, oh, I've got some muscle here already and I've seen it work. And so it was just working in a much more complex way.
Right. I love that. So you were at the moment for how long?
Uh, I started full time in 2016. No, 14. I started,
Okay.
so I guess I was there full time for 6 years, and about 2 to 3 years before that, I was consulting with them and working part time. So quite a long time.
And then you left the moment, which
I
is
did.
this, very progressive lead together type organization, and
Yeah.
you went into a large multinational. So what's your role
Yes.
there and how has that transition been?
Yeah, sure. So I am the director of human centered design global, which means that I serve an enabling role for all the human centered design people in all the different segments and parts of the business. I primarily have a design ops role, which means that I try to find ways to enable the practice, to enable the workforce, to amplify our amplify design's value and impact at scale. So I get to, it's very much an organizational change role where you're sort of pulling this lever and pulling that lever and doing all the things. One of the things that I do is run the Center of Excellence for Human-Centered Design, which involves people from all across the organization. And that has been the place where I've decided to flex the self-management muscle because I've had the ability to do that.
Nice.
I can
So,
explain more
well,
about that.
yeah, okay. So let's come back to that in a second. Let's talk
Yeah,
about the moment first. So
yeah,
at the moment, you started out like the moment never had, to the best of my knowledge, a CEO in the
yep,
traditional sense, right? It was a kind
yep,
of a partnership, and then it evolved, and so once you moved into holacracy, then there was this role called the lead link,
yep,
and you became the lead link of the organization. And so I don't think you've ever been a CEO, so it's not
no,
necessarily a completely fair question, but
yeah.
what did what was your experience around being a lead link, and how do you think that compares and maybe contrasts to a traditional CEO role?
Sure. I think the big difference is that, I mean, I've done a lot of thinking about this because I want to say, the lead link doesn't make all the decisions, but nor should a CEO. Like really,
Right,
you should.
right,
I think it's about the levels of accountability below you and how much you can really hold people fully accountable for something, and the trust you put in them to fully activate their leadership from whatever role they're coming into the organization, and sort of be the Ferrari in their own lane. Um, I think there is a level of hearing people out and knowing that people within the organization can change the organization remarkably in one meeting.
hmm
So like deciding we're going to just completely reorg, and normally that would go to the CEO for approval, and I may be part of that conversation probably if I were a lead link and we were changing, the way the organization was ordered or organized. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily have veto power, or like people still have the power to make it happen. I have a voice, and it's a voice that has weight, but it isn't like I'm not letting this happen. It's just,
right.
I could say it's not on strategy, or it's not what we're trying to do, or here are the reasons why I think it will hurt the company, but I am one voice as opposed to being the voice.
Right. And
That
how
said,
was,
it's hard to
yeah,
shed the idea that you're not a
yeah.
CEO too.
And how was that experience for you?
The experience being lead link was really like a great fit for me um, in the times when things were things were going well, because I do love to, it's going to sound cliche, but to empower people to like step into their own leadership. Empower isn't the right word, just like set up the structures and let it happen and encourage and lift people up in that way. When people come to me, I love saying like, yeah, but that's your role. Like, what would you do? I trust you. You do it. Like, I enjoy doing that. But I think when it got really hard was when things get really, when the business goes through like a moment of real struggle. And I really felt like it would have helped to have a greater sense of definition over what powers, who makes which calls. Because I think I spent many, many weeks up all night wondering if it was my call or how to do it, who needs to be in on that, whose role. And I think that wasn't in service to the company, in those moments. The company's fine. Like they did,
Yeah.
the moment survived, they're thriving, it's all good. Every business has struggles, but I remember thinking it was confusing for me, and um, and a challenge to sort of like draw lines. I felt like maybe that, if I were to give advice, it's like, know where those lines are before you get to the struggle so that it's really clear. It's really
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah. I
Because
can see.
muddling through it when when the crisis moment is like just really painful.
Mhm.
It's kind of
The
like when you
time.
have
Yeah.
when you go into business with someone and you create a partnership agreement when things are great. So that if you have to leave, you have that it's already done. There's not a whole lot of negotiation or figuring it out. You already decided it back here when things were great. And I think that would be the thing is to really, really like solidify what that leadership is and when it can really activate, like when we need the lead link to step in and make the call,
Yeah.
on hard things.
Nice. I hear that. I've observed that in the past, and
Mm.
I just think that's so. You articulated that so well. So, if you think about the moment, and
Yeah.
I've been on the sidelines watching the moment evolve through a number of
Yeah.
iterations over a number of years. When you think back, what are one or two things that you think we iterated to that and that worked really well,
Mm.
for at least that time, and maybe on the flip side, what are some things that you tried that you think, okay, we tried it and we learned and we didn't stay there very long.
Yeah. Well, one thing that came to mind was that comes to mind is I was really, really proud of the creation of the handbook. And I know it sounds like benign, like this little thing, but it was a writing down of our agreements, like explicit and implicit. Like what are the agreements we've made to work here, and what does it mean to be here, and how do we interact with each other, and what things are important, and what rituals are important. And it was a way to sort of have holacracy sit over here, which is like roles and accountabilities and things that are changing, can change all the time. And then there's this handbook that says, this is how the humans show up here. And these are the things that hold us together and say, this is special somehow. And these are, this is how we deal with things when there's trouble. And here are, the ways in which we hold ourselves together. And I thought that was a good way to balance out the fact that holacracy um, doesn't care about the human. Like it's it doesn't make a lot of space for the human beings, but that doesn't take away human beings. They're still there. They still have their feelings. They still
Right.
need culture and togetherness and all that. And so to have those two things, like the holacracy constitution over here and then our moment handbook over here, sort of knitted together something really nice. And you actually gave me really good advice, which was as soon as it's done, give it to someone else.
Mm.
Like, and I was like, yeah, that was the best thing, was to give it to Rob and have Rob like own that piece and own the development of it and take stuff out and put stuff in. And then it wasn't mine anymore, and it was just like that was great advice. I think one of the things that we also worked really hard on was the whole compensation thing. And I would say compensation in a holocratic or teal environment is sticky. Like, oh, what's the word? I don't know. Sticky is maybe not the word, but it's like fraught. Because there's no way to, I mean, that's not true. I'm sure that many organizations have found ways to move through it in a way that is healthy and productive. But there are many potholes that you can like fall into, like people's experiences and their relationships to money, their idea of who they are in relationships. Suddenly hierarchy just appears. Like you just start to imagine like, well, I can't possibly make the same as this person because of this, that, and the other. And then these conversations that are normally not part of your leading together environment are somehow here. And it really takes a lot of personal self-awareness and a belief in what you're doing to step into those conversations and really show up in a way that's productive and helpful. The moment did it, like, well done them. I was there too, so well done us. but that didn't mean it wasn't hard for years
Right.
to negotiate a self-set salary program. That was really hard, and not full teal and not full on the other side, but somewhere in the middle. And we learned a lot, but it's hard for people as they're building their lives and compensating themselves to a place where they can live their lives in a way they want to live and learn at the same time. Like,
Yes.
it's a hard thing to play with. It's a hard sandbox to play in.
And when the moment went into that, there were already salaries and compensation in place. So you weren't starting from scratch either,
No,
right? Which,
no,
that just
no.
brings
And
a
that
whole
makes it
nother
even
layer.
harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it was also exacerbated by the fact that we were inviting someone new in. And so when you invite someone new in, you have to consider what to pay them. And I think that started a conversation just because it does. And, if you're not going to do it in a traditional, like, the person who negotiates the best gets the best salary, then that's going to invite a new way of doing things for the new person joining you, for everyone who's there. But I must say, one of the things I think is great about all of that is the transparency of compensation is one of the things that's going to be critical in ensuring that marginalized communities, Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities, women, transgendered folks, that they are paid equitably. The only way to that end is compensation transparency. And so we have to get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we kind of like shoved ourselves there, and that was good. And it also brings up, challenges like why is that person getting paid less? I don't know. Or I can't see it. Can you see it? And then you start to wonder, oh, why did this happen? And I don't think the moment is certainly not alone in that journey to discovering that.
Yeah. So now you've moved on from the moment. You're in this big organization where you're coming off of now 6 or 7 years of having this sandbox to play in and experiment with a whole bunch of things, and going into what I presume is a much more traditional organization.
Yep.
And so what have you learned as you've gone through that transition, and how have you been able to bring some of that learning with you, and where have you also started to learn that, oh, maybe some of this works differently in different contexts or doesn't work?
I think, a surprising thing that I learned is that some of the language that we used to use in a self-managing organization related to accountability are so appreciated here. I don't think of them as novel things to do because I was kind of in the habit. But when I say like, oh, I can take that, that's well within my mandate, as opposed to saying that's my role, that's my accountability, saying something like that's well within my mandate. I've had people reach out to me to go, I really love the way you own things that are yours. And I'm like, oh, that's great, right? And then you see other people saying, yeah, I can do that. So just like saying that's in the job I signed up for, I can do that, as opposed to waiting for someone to assign it to you or waiting for approval. Just like being the Ferrari in your own lane is not impossible in a large organization. I think, you have to have a certain amount of bravery to say, I'm willing to have someone correct me or tell me where I've gone too far. I often use the language like, correct me if I'm wrong, or someone stop me if I'm running down a path I shouldn't be running. And it rarely happens. Usually people are happy to have people make decisions. I did discover that there was a part of the organization that I could turn into a self-managing organization, which was our Center of Excellence, because it's basically a little volunteer org that lives within the company. It's run by me and my team, and our job is to advance human-centered design across the organization. But we rely on partners throughout the organization in all different geographies to be a part of that and to help us shape it and make recommendations and build things. So what I started to notice was in the working groups, people were always sort of like stuck and wondering, whose job is this? I just remember many conversations of who makes that decision and whose job is this? And then it just came to me one night, why don't I just set this up? Like, why don't I just say, hey, let's try this? as an experiment. So I said, here are the rules. And, I did it in a very much like a directorial way. I didn't invite people to help me shape the rules because I thought we're not there yet to be able to like all participate in this. But I said like, okay, every group is going to have a product owner who owns this group, a chair, here are their accountabilities, here are the decisions they can make. And then there's going to be a sponsor. Here's what they do. Here's the decisions they make. And then you invite people to join the role and they can choose it. And the bias to action that it created was immense. Like the people who chose to be chairs, to chair the group meant that you were going to really own and take accountability for the operations of the group. So how it works, what kind of work it does, when we meet, who comes to the meetings, who is the membership. Like there was a lot packed in there, but people wanted that. They were like, this is a way for me to express my leadership. It's a thing I can put down on, what I've done this year and the impact I've made. And the amount of minutia lifted off of me was immense. I got to work more closely with people. They got to experience my trust in them to run with it, and it's just been functioning really well. And I was sort of self-organizing because I didn't say self-organizing, but I said like, here, we're going to try out these roles and see how they work. And people have just stepped way in and just energized those roles like I would expect them to do because we're all human beings and they like the clarity. The clarity was helpful.
Nice. So if there is somebody that's watching this and is thinking, I want to do more of this. I want to lean in more to leading together. I see that, the more traditional ways of working are ripe for evolution. Where would you suggest they start? What are some of the early things that people can try that give them a little bit of a launch pad?
Yeah, I would say get clear on some accountabilities, and give an accountability to one person, not 6 people. So that's one of the things I find that really releases the power of leading together is to say, Brent, you have this role. These are the accountabilities. You own all the decisions related to these accountabilities. And I look forward to hearing what those are. And then you don't have to be fully self-managed with a whole constitution to do that. That's just really good clarity that people have about what they're supposed to do, how they're energizing their role, how they'll be successful. And it's just one of the ways to invite people to really step into what they can do. And it also is incredible for advancing people's careers because they then take the responsibility and then you can give them real feedback on their decisions because they're making them. So they create this platter of things that you can then talk about and measure and explore. So I would say like just accountabilities and roles. It seems simple, but that's the thing. It's like be very clear because every time we get into a conversation and people are saying, I don't know whose role it is to do X, that's when my alarm bells go off and go, well, this won't work then because we don't know who's going to take responsibility. Or is it a game of hot potato where no one wants the responsibility?
Right.
Or is it just that no one wants to take it when they don't know it's theirs? Because people are also, it's like folks at Manulife where I work are lovely. They are great, talented, skilled, collaborative, fabulous people. And so they're often not wanting to like jump in someone else's lane when they're trying to do something. So without the clarity, it's not that people don't want to take accountability. They just don't know they can.
Right. And what I heard you say earlier is kind of overlapping with that is just the use of language, simply shifting a little bit of the language that you use. I love the Ferrari and be your Ferrari in your own lane.
Oh, and that was from I won't take account of or credit for that. That came from an article on the Holacracy One.
Okay.
It was one of the helpful articles that I read was about like, if you know your lane, go as fast as you want. Just like don't cause accidents.
Right.
So
by
like,
zooming off into somebody else's lane.
Or just like being reckless. Like,
right.
we've got to have a certain expertise about the business and our practice and whatever we're doing that would lead us to follow good practice while we're in that Ferrari. But, as fast as you can go safely, do it. I learned a lot from other leading together folks about safe to try, like when does that go off the rails? When are we too risky? And then when does it really help to say, you know what, we've established that the sandbox is pretty big, safe to try this new thing, and let's just reorganize and do it and not think too much about it. And I think it's the experience has led me to be fairly resilient and to not sweat changes too much,
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I so look forward to having this conversation again in a year or 2 years or 5 years and see what the additional learning is. It is a constant learning journey of how to do this and how to do it in different environments. It's just a journey. So thank you for sharing yours.
My pleasure. I think, if I leave you with any final thought, it would be about, what is at the core of the practice of leading together is a belief in the potential of people and what they can accomplish, and to believe in people's highest potential. And if you do that, you can take this anywhere you go. I don't necessarily think I was leaving behind self-organization to go to a hierarchy. I think I was looking for a new challenge, and I bring everything with me, and we'll see what happens there.
Beautiful.